إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن سيدنا ونبينا محمدا عبده ورسوله قال الله تبارك وتعالى في القرآن المجيد بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم والذين جاهدوا فينا لنهدينهم سبلنا سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. In the previous khutbah, we had referenced the life of the Prophet ﷺ and highlighted how the scholars relate his life to the failures and successes in general of people and what they have to go through. And we talked about how everyone goes through a period of constriction in order to experience a period of expansion. And specifically, we talked about how the ulama say that every Meccan period is followed by a Madani period. For everyone's Meccan period, which is a time of constriction and you can say difficulty, there is a Madani period, which is a time of expansion and growth, akin to the life of the Prophet ﷺ. So just tying that theme back into today's discussion, I think it's important to appreciate that this principle applies when it comes to so many things in life. This notion that constriction is often or almost always followed by expansion. And sometimes it's a pattern of constriction and constriction and expansion. This is repetitive back and forth, ultimately to lead to a very great expansion. Let me give you a simple example that many of us can relate to. When a mother is going through child labor, in the final stages of the pregnancy and into labor, this is physiologically what she goes through, right? There is constriction of the womb, which is very intense, it's very painful, and it's very difficult to go through, right? And then it's followed by expansion, where there is maybe a few minutes of relief. And then there's constriction again, right? The next contraction comes. It's literally called a contraction for that reason. Where there's constriction and contraction, it's incredibly painful. It's very difficult, and then there's relief. And during the contraction, everyone's telling the mother, if you've been in this sort of situation, that just get through this. Because once you get through this, you're going to get a bit of relief, right? Just get through this, just get through this one, right? That's what everyone's counseling the mother. And then there's expansion, right? The womb expands. And then eventually there's a very intense contraction. And then what's the outcome of that contraction, right? A child is born. and all of the memories of how difficult that labor was because of the greatest expansion, which is the coming of a child into this world. The mother and the father, but the mother in particular, forgets everything that had happened before. That repetitive constriction and expansion results in this incredible expansion that essentially wipes away the memories of what came before. As we go through life, we sort of go through a similar pattern, and the deen has established this spiritually as well. For example, you'll see over the course of the day, over the course of the year, over the course of a person's lifetime, built in to our routine and into our ibadah is constriction. Why? So that there is some subsequent expansion. So there's some subsequent expansion. On a daily basis, for example, we have the salah that's built into our routine. Now, what is the salah? When a person engages in prayer, what they're essentially doing is they are raising their hands, standing before Allah, and for those 5 or 10 minutes that they're standing before Allah, there's constriction. In the sense that you and I can't do what we want to do during our prayer. We're constricted. We can't eat, we can't talk, we can't socialize, we can't move. All of these things will invalidate the prayer. So we put ourselves through this temporary 5, 10, maybe 15-minute period of contraction or constriction. Why? So that we can experience expansion immediately after the prayer is done. And the deen has this built into us 5 times a day. We're forced 5 times a day to put ourselves through a bit of constriction, purposefully, intentionally, for our own benefit, because after the prayer comes a period of expansion. Now, let's take this a step further. This happens on an annual level as well, right? You go through the year, 9, 10, 11 months, relatively, spiritually speaking, relatively expanded. And then the month of Ramadan comes, and now we force ourselves into this period of constriction. During this constriction, we bring difficulty upon ourselves purposefully. We tell ourselves we can't eat all day, and we can't drink all day. We tell ourselves that we have to watch our mouths, we have to watch our actions, right? We're putting ourselves voluntarily into this constriction. I mean, the deen commands it, but we're doing this ourselves. No one's forcing us to. We're doing it on our own. And then all night, we're praying. I mean, not all night, but a good portion of the night. We're normally from 8 to 10 or 9 to 11. Maybe we'd be watching something on TV. Maybe we'd be hanging out. Much of the community is engaged in more voluntary constriction. We come to the masjid, we gather together, and we pray for sometimes hours at a time. And we constrict ourselves even further. Most of us don't sleep much during the month of Ramadan, right? Suhoor is 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. You and I are forcing ourselves to wake up voluntarily, placing this constriction on ourselves. And we're doing this for 30 consecutive days. This is built into the format of the deen. And the effect of that constriction that we put ourselves through is this incredible expansion that the believer experiences right after Ramadan is done, where we feel closer to Allah and closer to our deen than we'd ever felt before, at least for the past 12 months or so. And the power of that constriction carries us until the following Ramadan comes. And then many of us feel, even at this stage, we're just a month or 2 from Ramadan, we almost feel like we need Ramadan. But think about that for a moment. We feel like we need that constriction again. We do need it, because it's through constriction that you and I are going to experience spiritual expansion. So it applies on a daily basis when it comes to our prayer, where we voluntarily constrict ourselves for the purposes of expansion. We do this constriction, expansion 5 times a day to sustain ourselves. It happens on a yearly basis when it comes to the month of Ramadan. And it also happens in a life basis as well. A person goes through many years, and there's a mandate of Hajj that comes upon that person. And if you think about Hajj, what is it? It's more constriction. I mean, it's not a vacation, right? It's a person has to save a lot of money, and now they're financially constricted because they're spending $10,000, $15,000 toward this. They're physically constricted. You're required to go to one particular place. It's hot, right? It's uncomfortable. You're required to put away your clothing for 4 or 5 days. You can't wear what you want. You have to wear your ihram. You can't put on fragrance. You can't groom yourself in the way you'd like. You are constricting yourself voluntarily in a foreign land intensely for 4 or 5 days, right? But we know that after a person comes back from Hajj, as the Prophet ﷺ said, they return back as if they're a newborn child. And ask anyone who's gone for Hajj, and when they returned home, the degree of spiritual expansion they feel. Ask them what it feels like. They've never felt like that in their life, right? As if they were like a newborn, like they've experienced a new life altogether. But that only resulted because of this contraction or constriction of Hajj. So this is what the Deen has created in terms of format. We said last time, every Meccan period is followed by a Madani period, right? But on a spiritual level, again, every constriction is followed by an expansion. And we often have to put ourselves into constriction so that we can experience expansion. So we do that through Salah, we do that through fasting, we do that through Hajj as well. This is just the pattern of Deen that you'll see. On the other hand, you have people who go through life never putting themselves into constriction. If a person decides, I don't want to believe in Allah, I don't want to believe in God, I don't want to follow any rules or regulations as it pertains to my life, I want to live things the way I want to live, they're never putting themselves in this form of voluntary constriction. And the effect of it, we sort of see in their lives. Now, what's the ultimate expansion? What's the ultimate constriction? Let's put it that way. What's the ultimate constriction? It's life. It's life as a whole. The Prophet said in a hadith, "Ad-dunya sijnul mu'min," that the world is like a prison for the believer. It's a constriction. The entire period of time is a complete constriction. A believer knows that throughout their day, 24 hours a day, 7 days of the week, through their entire lifetime, 50, 60, 70 years, they have to live within these boundaries. They can't look at whatever they want to look at or eat whatever they want to eat. Right? Yeah, Ramadan puts you under more constriction, but broadly speaking, we're constricted. We can't do whatever we want to do. We can't consume whatever we want to consume. We can't, we have to follow a certain set of rules that constrict us. And what's the effect of a believer voluntarily constricting themselves in this world? Inevitably, there's going to be expansion. And what's the expansion? It's Jannah. It's Jannah. Jannah is a place where there is no constriction. It's ultimate expansion. It's the ultimate expansion. Just like I mentioned to you that during labor, mother constriction, expansion, and then there's that ultimate constriction she experiences, that final contraction that's incredibly painful. And the expansion that results from that is a newborn child. And the tears will flow from her eyes when she sees her child for the first time. Imagine the tears that will flow from our eyes, figuratively speaking, when we walk into Jannah for the first time. And in fact, the hadith mentions that the experience of Jannah is so powerful, I'm paraphrasing, it's so powerful that a person will forget all of the memories of the difficulties they experience in this world when they look at it for just a moment. That's how powerful that one moment is. It's like the moment you see your child after that contraction. You see that child and you forget about what happened in the labor and delivery room. A person sees Jannah, they forget about what happened in this world because that's how powerful that final ultimate expansion is. That final ultimate expansion is that powerful on the human being. They forget about all of it. It's as if that final expansion is such that it eliminates all the memories of any prior contraction or constriction that we've ever experienced. And so that's what life is. And that's how the Deen has been designed. Just like from a trial and tribulation perspective, every period of difficulty is followed by a period of comfort. Just like every Meccan period is followed by a Madani period, similarly, every spiritual constriction is followed by some degree of spiritual expansion. Whether that's on a daily basis with our 5 prayers, giving us a breather, spiritually 5 times a day, whether it be constriction through the month of Ramadan that gives us a year's supply of support, whether it be constriction through the Hajj, which gives us, a lifetime, you can say, of expansion, or whether it be the ultimate constriction, which is this life, which results in the ultimate expansion, which is a limitless Jannah in which you and I, we will never have to experience any form of constriction ever again. Not voluntary constriction. We never have to force ourselves to do anything in Jannah, whether it be fasting or praying or any of this, or holding back. There's no holding back in Jannah. Or whether it be forced constriction where Allah puts a trial upon us. Even that doesn't exist in Jannah. The reward and the outcome of voluntarily constricting ourselves in this world, i.e., being Muslim, is an ultimate expansion that is one that erases the memory of any prior difficulty we experienced. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the tawfiq to appreciate the this sort of repetitive nature of constriction and expansion. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to experience that final expansion. Subhanallah bihamdihi subhanallah al-azim aqulu qawli hadha wa astaghfirullah li wa lakum wa li sa'iril muslimina fastaghfiruhu innahu huwal ghafurur rahim. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن سيدنا ونبينا محمدا عبده ورسوله. قال الله تبارك وتعالى في القرآن المجيد: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم: إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم: أرحم أمتي بأمتي أبي بكر وأشدهم في أمر الله عمر وأصدقهم حياء عثمان وأقضاهم علي وفاطمة سيدة نساء أهل الجنة والحسن والحسين سيدا شباب أهل الجنة وحمزة أسد الله وأسد رسوله. اللهم اغفر للعباس وولده مغفرة ظاهرة وباطنة لا تغادر ذنبا رضوان الله تعالى عليهم أجمعين. اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين. اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين. اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين. اللهم انصر الإسلام والمسلمين. اللهم انصر الإسلام والمسلمين. اللهم انصر الإسلام والمسلمين. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. عباد الله اتقوا الله واذكروا الله يذكركم ودعوه يستجب لكم ولذكر الله تعالى أكبر والله